What's up, YouTube? I just want to answer some questions I got on my Facebook page today about real fighting and why I don't think Kung Fu works. I stated that in my last video, and someone must have heard it and got a comment on it, and I want to, kind of say that I didn't really mean it to say that Kung Fu doesn't work in a fight, because I don't want to, come across as the type of person who doesn't, who bashes any kind of martial art. I love all martial arts. I would never put anybody down or say anything bad. But you gotta understand, you have to look at fighting in realistic terms nowadays. Okay, I love Kung Fu, I love Kempo, I love Wing Chun. I've studied all those arts. I studied Aikido, studied a lot of different martial arts. I've been in a lot of fights in the street, in the cage, in the ring, and I was a born fighter. I'm born under the sign of the dragon, just like Bruce Lee was. So I'm a born fighter. I have it in me to fight. But when I first started learning karate and Kempo and all that kind of thing, when you're a kid, you're misled by that kind of stuff because it's all fantasy. You want to do what you see in the movies, and then, you grow up and you learn that that's not real. When you get into a real fight, you're like, well, okay, well, it doesn't work like it does in the movies. And one of the first fights I got into, I didn't know any ground skills at the time, and I thought I was just going to stand up and fight this guy, and he took me down on the ground, and I didn't know what to do on the ground, and someone just happened to pull him off me. So it really didn't turn into a fight, but it kind of woke me up a little bit. Says, hey, I got to learn some ground skills here, because what am I going to do when I can't stand up and fight? So that's what kind of clicked in me to go what Bruce Lee was saying, to adapt what works for you and discard what doesn't work for you. And now that the UFC has become so popular and MMA has become so popular, a lot of people are pissed off. All the traditional martial artists are pissed off because a lot of the techniques have been exposed, and we really did find out what worked and what didn't work. Because you can't look at the UFC now. Forget MMA now. I'm not talking about now. Now everybody knows MMA. There's not a fighter that doesn't know jiu-jitsu or kickboxing or anything like that. Everybody's well-rounded. I'm talking about when the UFC first came on the scene. Two very important fights: Royce Gracie versus Keith Hackney, and Royce Gracie versus Jason DeLuca. You got to watch those two fights, because back then, when the UFC first came out, there were no rules. There were no rules in the first UFCs. It was anything goes. You could pretty much kick in the nuts and stomp on the head, and there were no gloves. It was bare knuckle, and so why didn't Keith Hackney use his Kempo? Why didn't Jason DeLuca use his Kung Fu? Because when it came down to it, those techniques are not designed for a real fight. You're not a robot. The other guy is not going to wait for you to get into your stance and block the punch and do your technique. The other guy's not going to stand there and wait for you. He's going to whoop your ass. So that's really what it comes down to. A lot of the old, techniques have been exposed. I'm not going to sit here and say that this art's not going to work or art's not going to work, because what it really comes down to is the individual. You can make any technique work if you study hard, and you can never predict what's going to happen in a fight. But, when it comes down to it, as soon as you get punched in the face, your instincts are going to kick in, your adrenaline's going to start going, and you're going to forget about karate, you're going to forget about Kung Fu, you're going to just want to get into a boxing stance and hit that motherfucker right back. And that's what it comes down to, We learn the karate, we learn the Kempo, we learn the Wing Chun, we learn the Aikido, we learn all the techniques, and that's how you have to start out. You got to start out with the basics, but then you got to push all that aside, and you got to say, okay, well, let me look at fighting in a realistic, combative way. Okay, you have to look at it realistically. If you don't know how to box, if you don't know how to punch, if you don't know where to punch, that's it. You're going to get your ass whipped. And that's what it comes down to. And I think that's what Freddie Lee is missing. Is I think when it comes down to is he's mad. Like a lot of the traditional Kung Fu guys are mad because all the techniques have been exposed. Even Bruce Lee exposed it back in the 70s. And he exposed it. He said, okay, this Kung Fu stuff, certain techniques are going to work, but basically, it's garbage. You got to learn how to, box. And that's why Bruce Lee, and adapted boxing and, kickboxing and fencing and stuff like that, because, it gives you a more realistic idea of what fighting is. Fighting boxers, especially boxers, fight in milliseconds. A punch can be thrown in a millisecond. If you don't know what a millisecond is, it's an eye blink or a camera flash. That's how fast a millisecond is. So that's how fast a punch can be thrown. So, you know, all the traditional blocks and stuff like that Kung Fu teaches you and Kempo teaches you, it's not really going to be too realistic in a real fight. You know, it's not really going to work the way you think it's going to work, because it's very hard to see punches coming. You know, that's why you got to train boxing and learn how to slip punches and move, you know, and use your legs. And, you know, it's not all about the fancy Kung Fu techniques anymore, you know. It's, you got to push all that stuff to the side, you know. And a lot of people, you know, get misled because they think, oh, he's an Asian guy, he knows Kung Fu, I'm gonna learn deadly. No, you're not gonna learn no deadly Kung Fu techniques from no Asians, okay? Not all Asians know Kung Fu, you know. It doesn't work like you see it in the movies. You know, you gotta really take the time to think about fighting in a whole. Watch street fights on YouTube. What do you see guys doing in street fights? They duck their head, they pull their head back, they're swinging like maniacs. You know, that's real fighting. You know, that's what it comes down to. Is, you know, that's a real fight. You know, you never see two guys in a street fight doing any Kung Fu. When have you ever seen two guys in a street fight doing any real Kung Fu? Never. You never see that, because it doesn't work the way you think it does. You know, like I said, go on YouTube right now, watch Keith Hackney versus Royce Gracie, watch Jason DeLuca versus Royce Gracie. You know, Keith Hackney was a Kempo guy, Jason DeLuca was a Kung Fu guy, but when it came down to it, they had to rely on basic street techniques. They had to rely on basic punches and kicks and, you know, basic boxing, basic street fighting. You know, and that's what it came down to. I didn't see Keith Hackney use any kind of Kempo techniques when he fought Gracie. And, you know, you can't use the excuse, oh, well, you know, traditional martial arts weren't designed for the cage, because that's bullshit, man. Like I said, when the UFC first came out, there were no rules. You could do anything. So why didn't traditional martial arts serve any purpose for these guys when they got in the cage with Gracie? Why didn't Keith Hackney use